Starting off my list at number 10, I have the 2008-2009 offseason. This offseason was all about the Yankees. Coming off an embarrassing third-place finish in 2008, the Yankees were ready to go crazy, and they did just that. It started with Mark Teixeira, one of the top first basemen in the game, who they got into a bidding war with the Red Sox over and eventually won. Along with him, they signed one of the top pitchers in the game in CC Sabathia, who had just had one of the most dominant second halves in history after a trade to the Brewers the prior season. Along with him was a fireballer, A.J. Burnett, who had been one of the better pitchers in the game thanks to his velocity and nasty stuff. They even traded for Nick Swisher from the White Sox. All of these moves helped set up the Yankees' run to a World Series championship in 2009. Elsewhere, we saw Manny Ramirez decide to stay with the Dodgers on a 3-year deal after an amazing second half in 2008, and the Rockies trade one of their best players in Matt Holliday to the A's. This was one of the more eventful off seasons, especially for one team. At number 9, I have the 2014-2015 offseason. When the Cubs won the World Series in 2016, people couldn't help but think of how big the offseason was prior to 2015. That offseason was all about two pitchers atop the free agent board, Jon Lester and Max Scherzer, both who had big stories in their own right. For Lester, it came down to the Cubs and his old team, the Red Sox, who had traded him away that prior season but wanted him back. Even though Red Sox owner John Henry flew to his ranch to try and persuade him to come back, he still decided to join up with Theo Epstein in Chicago to help them end their World Series curse. As for Max Scherzer, he was one of the top pitchers in the game at the time and went on to sign one of the biggest contracts in the game, a 7-year, $210 million deal. Elsewhere, the Red Sox made a couple of splashes, bringing in Giants fan favorite and 3-time World Series winner Pablo Sandoval, and we all know how that turned out, along with their old top prospect, Hanley Ramirez. We also saw a couple of young Cuban sensations, Yohan Moncada and Yasmani Tomas, whose biddings garnered a lot of attention. We even had some big trades, including Josh Donaldson to the Blue Jays and Jason Hayward to the Cardinals. At number 8, I have the 2006-2007 offseason. What ruled this offseason was Dice K Mania, as he was being labeled as the next best pitcher from Japan and even the greatest pitcher from Japan ever. The Red Sox won the bid with over $50 million and eventually agreed to a contract right before the deadline. It didn't stop there for the Red Sox, though, as they landed one of the top right fielders in the game, J.D. Drew, and one of the better shortstops in the game at the time in Julio Lugo. They even added another pitcher from Japan in Hideki Okajima. Elsewhere, we had the home run king Barry Bonds contemplating his next move at 42 years old, but ended up going back to the Giants, while Jason Schmidt left the Giants to head to their division rival Dodgers. Speaking of the Giants, they also landed one of the best lefties in the game in Barry Zito on a massive contract, while Alfonso Soriano, who had just become a member of the 40-40 club, signed a large deal with the Cubs. At number 7, I have the 1998-1999 offseason. The 1998 season featured what I would like to call the rebirth of baseball, as Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa embarked on the great home run chase. Once the Yankees won the World Series and the season ended, it didn't slow down, and the offseason had plenty of juice. The big story was Kevin Brown, as he received the first ever $100 million contract from the Dodgers, a move which many around baseball criticized due to creating a larger gap between big and small market teams. He wasn't the only big-name pitcher to come off the board, though, as Randy Johnson decided to join the Arizona Diamondbacks on a 4-year deal, an expansion team that had just played their first season. They also brought in Steve Finley, who was also a key part of that 2001 Diamondbacks team that won the World Series. There was also a big-name slugger in Albert Bell coming off a 7.1 Fangraph WAR season, who joined the Orioles after opting out of his contract with the White Sox since they wouldn't give him a raise in salary. Leaving the Orioles, though, was Rafael Palmeiro and Hall of Famer Roberto Alomar, who ended up going to the Rangers and Indians. As for the other sluggers out there was also Red Sox great Mo Vaughn, who just edged out Albert Bell for the 1995 AL MVP a couple of years prior, and he went to the Angels. Up next, I have the 1992-1993 offseason. This offseason was all about where the best player in the game, Barry Bonds, would go. After an amazing first 7 seasons with the Pirates, in which he had already put up a 50.3 wins above replacement by the age of 27, people were on the edge of their seats to see where he would call his next home. At one point, it looked like he would be going to the New York Yankees, who had offered the same record contract Ryne Sandberg had, which was the highest in baseball at the time, according according to Bonds himself, a 5-year, $30.5 million deal. The Yankees told him he had until 2 o'clock in the afternoon to accept, but by that time, a better offer had come in from the San Francisco Giants for 6 years and $43.75 million, a record contract at the time. Elsewhere, we also saw one of the best pitchers in the game, now Hall of Famer Greg Maddux, hit the market after a Cy Young Award season with the Cubs. Funny enough, it also looked like he would be heading to the Yankees, but due to some health problems with someone in the front office, the Yankees didn't get back to Maddux in time, and he ended up signing with the Atlanta Braves, who were just coming off a World Series appearance. Speaking of Hall of Famers, we had one that jumped ship in one of the greatest rivalry in sports when Wade Boggs went from the Red Sox to the Yankees. We also had other Hall of Famers like Kirby Puckett and Ozzie Smith stay with their clubs. During this offseason, we even had 2 new teams join Major League Baseball as expansion teams, the Florida Marlins and the Colorado Rockies. Coming up next, I have the 2000-2001 offseason. This offseason was all about the record-breaking signing of one of the game's top stars, Alex Rodriguez. At the time, Kevin Garnett in basketball was the top-paid athlete in sports until A-Rod received a record $252 million contract from the Rangers, a staggering number at the time. We also saw another record-breaking contract with the Blue Jays and Carlos Delgado as he signed a 4-year, $68 million deal, which ended up averaging to be the highest salary until A-Rod signed. Another record-breaking contract went to Mike Hampton, who the Rockies gave 8 years and $121 million, which at the time was the largest contract in baseball until A-Rod signed. There was also Manny Ramirez, who surprisingly left the Indians to join the Red Sox on an 8-year, $160 million contract, while one of the better pitchers in the game, and Mike Mussina, joined the other side of the rivalry with the Yankees on a 6-year contract worth $88.5 million. Up next, I have the 2011-2012 offseason. Let's start off with one of the most shocking deals of all time, with Albert Pujols heading to the Angels. A lock for the Hall of Fame, Pujols had a legendary first 11 seasons in St. Louis, making people think there would be no way he would ever leave. Well, the Cardinals decided to take their time, and he took his talents to the Angels in a shocking move, signing a 10-year, $254 million contract. The Angels didn't stop there, as they also signed lefty pitcher C.J. Wilson, who was one of the more solid pitchers in the game at the time. Pujols didn't just get a big contract, though, as slugger Prince Fielder received a massive payday from the Tigers, a 9-year, $214 million deal. Elsewhere, we saw another highly touted pitcher from Japan and Yu Darvish head over to the States, with the Rangers winning the posting and eventually signing him to a deal. The team that had probably the busiest offseason, though, was the Miami Marlins, who were actually called the Florida Marlins before changing it, as it was required to open their brand new stadium. They ended up hiring a World Series winning manager in Ozzie Guillen and went on a spending spree, signing one of the top shortstops in the game in Jose Reyes, one of the better pitchers in Mark Burley, and closer Heath Bell. Unfortunately, all 3 of those players would be gone by the next season, and Ozzie Guillen was fired as the Marlins finished in last place while not drawing much attendance, an absolute disaster. Up next, I have the 2022-2023 offseason. This offseason was all about a loaded free agent class led by Aaron Judge, some big-name pitchers in Jacob deGrom and Justin Verlander, and 4 shortstops who were some of the best players in the game, Trey Turner, Carlos Correa, Xander Bogaerts, and Dansby Swanson. Let's start with Aaron Judge. It really came down to 2 teams, the Giants and his old team, the Yankees, while the Padres did make a run at him as well. During the winter meetings, it looked like Aaron Judge was on his way to the Giants, as John Heyman put out a legendary tweet stating, "Arson Judge appears headed to the Giants," while San Francisco Chronicles reporter Susan Slusser said there was a buzz that he was going to San Fran. However, with a last-second phone call, Hal Steinbrenner was able to convince Judge to return to the Yankees on a 9-year, $360 million deal, while also giving him the title as the captain. The Yankees were also able to stick it to the Giants by signing lefty Carlos Rodon, who was coming off a career year. And on the other side of New York, we saw the Mets sign a highly touted pitcher out of Japan in Kadai Senga, who had a lot of interest from multiple teams. As for the shortstops, while Turner and Swanson had pretty smooth free agencies, as Turner went to Philly and Swanson went to Chicago, Correa and Bogaerts had drama. After Correa originally agreed to sign with the Giants for 13 years and $350 million, he failed his physical and ended up back on the market. Not too long later, he agreed to a 12-year, $315 million deal with the Mets, but because of another failed physical, he was once again back on the market. In the end, he ended up going back to the Twins, the team he had just signed with the prior season. As for Bogaerts, it looked like he was getting close to going back to Boston, as reports said there was momentum building for a return, but at the last second, since the Padres missed out on Judge and also Trey Turner, they offered Bogaerts an 11-year, $280 million contract that he could not turn down. Elsewhere, we even saw some blockbuster trades, including Sean Murphy heading to the Braves, Luis Arraez heading to the Marlins for Pablo Lopez, and the Blue Jays shipping out one of the top catching prospects in the game in Gabriel Moreno, along with Lourdes Gurriel Jr. for Dalton Varsho. Up next, I have the 2003-2004 offseason. This offseason will always be remembered for the Alex Rodriguez trade saga. Simply put, the Rangers didn't want A-Rod's record-setting contract anymore since they weren't winning and they wanted to trade him. The Red Sox, who were coming off getting walked off by the Yankees and Aaron Boone in Game 7 of the ALCS, looked to make a bold move. While they did trade for one of the best pitchers in the game at the time in Curt Schilling to go alongside Pedro Martinez, as well as sign closer Keith Folk, they explored a possible trade for A-Rod. Eventually, a trade was agreed upon that would send Manny Ramirez and John Lester to the Rangers, with shortstop Nomar Garciaparra being shipped to the White Sox for Maglio Ordonez. Unfortunately for the Red Sox at the time, though, they weren't able to fit A-Rod's contract into their payroll while also being able to spend on other players. Because of this, they tried to restructure A-Rod's deal, but the Players Union shot it down and the deal was dead. Not too long after, Yankee third baseman Aaron Boone tore his ACL playing basketball, and the rest was history. It wasn't just this, though, for the Yankees. They also signed Gary Sheffield and traded for an electric arm from the Expos and Javier Vasquez. They even made a trade for veteran Dodgers pitcher Kevin Brown, who was coming off a season where he had 32 starts and a 2.39 ERA. Not everyone came to the Yankees, though, as a few Yankee legends went west, as Roger Clemens and Andy Pettitte went to the Astros and David Wells went to the Padres. Simply put, it was a monumental offseason for the Yankees. Elsewhere, we saw the Angels spend big on Vladimir Guerrero and Bartolo Colon. The Tigers surprisingly lure Ivan Rodriguez to the Tigers, and Greg Maddux returned to the Cubs. All in all, the Red Sox and Yankees dominated headlines of this offseason for one of the greatest players of all time, while we saw 5 eventual Hall of Famers end up going to different teams. And last but not least, I have the 2021-2022 offseason. The big story of this offseason was the lockout, but that's not exactly what made it one of the craziest offseasons. It was the before and after that made it memorable. With the collective bargaining agreement expiring at midnight on December 2nd and no new deal in place, teams raced to get as much done as they could. Early in the offseason, we saw some decent signings like Eduardo Rodriguez to the Tigers and Noah Syndergaard to the Angels, but it really picked up as the clock approached 0. Big names like Robbie Ray and Starling Marte came off the board on the last day of November, but on the first day of December, a day before the lockout would commence, we saw some massive splashes, with the Rangers landing both Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, Kevin Gausman going to Toronto, Javier Baez joining Eduardo Rodriguez in Detroit, and Max Scherzer shocking everyone and going to the Mets on a record-setting contract that paid him over $40 million per year. After this, though, the lockout began, and it was pretty much the worst offseason ever during this time. It looked like at one point Major League Baseball and the Players Union were going to agree to a deal, and at 3 in the morning, we even saw Bob Nightingale passing out bagels to people waiting outside Roger Dean Stadium to see if a deal would be reached. While we didn't get a deal that night, we did eventually get a new CBA on March 10th after 99 days, and after this happened, the floodgates opened, with more big names coming off the board. Chris Bryant surprised everyone, going to the Rockies. Justin Verlander went back to the Astros. Clayton Kershaw stayed with the Dodgers, while bats and Jorge Soler and Nick Castellanos went to the Marlins and Phillies. The biggest splash of all, though, was Freddie Freeman signing with the Dodgers, while lots of people thought he would stay with the Braves, who instead decided to trade for Matt Olson from the A's. So that's my list. Tell me what you think down below in the comments. If you can on the way out, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, and I'll talk to you next time.